You all right up the back there? Yay! Woo! I can see you all. You can see me, that's very good. Thank you so much for coming to this event tonight. Frankissstein, a love story. I hope you're going to enjoy it. I want to begin with just something that might interest you. Here we are, the Edinburgh magazine, 1818. It's topical. There never was a wilder story imagined, yet, like most of the fictions of this age, it has an air of reality attached to it. Now, reviews back then in 1818 were anonymous, but this is actually Walter Scott writing about Mary Shelley's Frankissstein. Walter Scott believed, in fact, that it was Percy Bysshe Shelley, the poet, who was Mary's husband. He thought that he'd written it, but actually not so. It was a young woman, only 19, scarcely 19, who had written it. And I want to take you back to that time. I want you to take you to that fateful holiday on Lake Geneva in 1816. Assembled there were Lord Byron and his physician, John Polidori, Mary Shelley, and her soon-to-be husband, Percy Shelley, the poet. Mary Shelley was then just about 18. And there was also the stepsister there, Claire Clairmont, who was sleeping with Byron because Byron didn't like to be bored. Mary Shelley had fallen in love with the poet Shelley when he came to her father's narrow little house in Skinner Street, which is in the East End of London, near Smithfield, near the meat market. And back in those days, if you were a thinker of any kind, you didn't just think about one thing. Things weren't separated. So it wasn't philosophy or poetry or science or medicine or politics. No, it was all of these things. And if you were a thinking man or woman of the Enlightenment, you were expected to come and be able to converse about all of these things. And so poor Mary Shelley, her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, had died in childbirth. Mary Wollstonecraft, of course, the first feminist who'd written A Vindication of the Rights of Woman in 1794. It was her answer to Tom Paine's Vindication of the Rights of Man after the French Revolution, when actually people in Britain thought it's going to change. It's not going to be this rigid hierarchical structure that we're all used to. We're going to see something exciting happening. And it wasn't just in politics they thought something exciting was going to happen, because, of course, the Industrial Revolution was well underway. But Mary Shelley had never met her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, but she knew all about her, and she'd read her book, and she wanted to be worthy of her mother. Her father, William Godwin, was a radical. In fact, he was already saying right back then that marriage was a monopoly that should be broken up. So, an unusual guy to have for your dad. He accepted that he wasn't much of a parent, and his way of bringing up Mary Shelley was to let her hide behind the sofa in the little narrow house in Skinner Street and listen to what was going on, the kinds of conversations that might be happening at any time in the house. Humphrey Davy came. He just invented his famous lamp, the Davy lamp. He was interested in what was happening chemically, in physics. And the young Mary sitting behind the sofa heard that. She also was there when Signor Galvani came round. Signor Galvani was causing a great stir in London because he'd arrived with his little electric probes. And he was sticking them into frogs' legs, and of course the frogs' legs were twitching and going on. And then he was able to go and get some corpses from Newgate Prison and stick the probes into those corpses as well. Now, from the little house in Skinner Street, Mary Shelley could look out into the yard of Newgate Prison, and she could see the prisoners walking round and round, having their last exercise before they went off to be hanged. Remember, men are hanged, pictures are hung. So she was watching this, just in case you didn't know. She was there in the little house in Skinner Street watching this happen. And then here comes Signor Galvani saying, he felt that he had discovered something of the principle of life. And just before Mary Shelley went on the fateful holiday in Geneva, they all went, all of them, to a lecture given by Shelley's doctor, Dr. Lawrence, where the question was, whence proceeds the principle of life? Everybody had seen Galvani's experiments. Everybody had had him to dinner. They all wanted to know, what is the answer to this question? Whence proceeds the principle of life? And was life something divine, or was it something organic? And Shelley's doctor, Dr. Lawrence, argued that there was no such thing as the super added value. He said no. He said human beings are electricity, chemistry, biology, nothing else. There is no super added value. Of course, the Times London wrote about this the following day and said that Dr. Lawrence would have us no better than the orangutan or the oyster. Nevertheless, this conversation was preying on the young Mary Shelley's mind when they went off to Lake Geneva. Of course, they got there. Everything was lovely. They were young people. They were eating food, sailing their boats, riding their horses. Everything was wonderful. And then it started to rain. And there was nothing to do at all except read German ghost stories. And at that point, Byron suggested that they should perhaps all try and write their own ghost stories. His physician, Polidori, wrote really the basis of all the vampire stories that were then to follow. He wrote a story called The Vampire because he was fascinated by blood. For a long time, Mary Shelley couldn't think of anything, and then she did. But what might have led up to that fateful night when, as she put it, she woke up from her dream and saw the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling by his bedside? Of course, it was all the things that had been preying on her mind before, but it was more than that. So I'm going to read to you a little bit from my book, Frankissstein, which is where Shelley and Mary Shelley elope, and then something that happens which has a great bearing on the future story that she will write. Stars in the sky, like uncounted chances. 4 o'clock in the morning, felt slippers on our feet, our boots in our hands so as not to wake father, though he sleeps deeply when he takes laudanum for his ague. We ran through the streets to where the world was waiting, and we reached the coach, and there was Shelley, pale and pacing, an angel without wings. He embraced me, burying his face in my hair, whispering my name. Our modest bags were loaded, but suddenly I turned from him and I ran back home, stricken with conscience, to leave my father a note on the mantelpiece. I could not break his heart. I deceived myself. I could not break his heart without telling him I was breaking his heart. We live by language. And then I was off again, running, my hat slipping round my neck and my breath dry in my mouth. Anxious and exhausted, we were gone, post-haste to Dover, seasick under the sails of a boat that took us to Calais, and my first night in his arms, in a padded room, in a dark inn, with the rattle of iron cartwheels going over the cobbles, and my heart sounding louder than iron and wheels. This is a love story. Our travels were not easy. We had no clothes, and Paris was dirty and expensive. The food gave us cramps and foul smells. Shelley lived off bread and wine, and I added cheese. And at last we found a moneylender from whom Shelley was able to borrow £60. Buoyed up by our wealth, we decided to travel, and we set off into the country, seeking simplicity and the natural man that Rousseau had written about. There will be beef and milk and good bread, said Shelley, and young wine and clean water. Well, that was the story. The reality was otherwise. For some weeks we endured, endeavouring to hide from each other our disappointment. This was the land of liberty. This was where my mother had come to find freedom, where she'd written The Rights of Woman. We thought to find like minds and open hearts. And in reality, the cottagers overcharged us for every little thing. And the farms were dirty and broken. The laundresses stole buttons and braids. Our guides were surly. And the donkey Shelley hired, that we might take it in turns to ride, that donkey was lame. Does something ail you? Asked Shelley, disturbed by my silences. And I did not say, yes, the sour milk, the sweating cheese, the rank sheets, the fleas, the rainstorms, the rot, the beds stuffed with straw, stuffed with mites, the soft vegetables, the gristly meat, the lice-teem fish, the weevil loaves, the distress of my father, thoughts of my mother, the state of my underclothes. Only the heat, my love. He asked me to bathe naked with him in the river, but I was too shy, and instead I watched his body, white and slender and sculpted. There is something unworldly about his form, an approximation, as though his body has been put on hastily, so that his spirit might walk in the world. We read Wordsworth out loud to distract the hours, but France was not poetry, it was peasants. At last, knowing my distress, Shelley secured us places on a barge that floated out of France and down the Rhine. Was it better? Smug Switzerland, drunken Germany. More wine, I said. And so we passed our days underfed, overdrunk, longing for the soul and not knowing where to find it. But what I want does exist, if I dare to find it. One day, not far from Mannheim, we saw the towers of a castle rising out of the mist like a warning. Shelley adores towers, woods, ruins, graveyards, any part of man or nature that broods. And so we followed the track, tortuous towards it, ignoring the staring looks of peasants at their forks and hoes. At the foot of the castle, at last, we stopped and shivered. Even in the hot afternoon sun, it felt cold. "What is this place?" asked Shelley of a man on a cart. "Castle Frankissstein," he said. Desolate place of brooding. "There is a story," said the man, requiring money to tell it, and Shelley paid twice over, not disappointed by what he heard. The castle had belonged to an alchemist named Conrad Diepel. Too early, his beloved wife had died, and unable to bear his loss, he refused to bury her, determined to discover the secret of life. One by one, his servants abandoned him, and he lived alone and was seen at dawn and dusk, wandering amidst the graveyards and charnel houses, dragging home what fetid bodies he could find, grinding the bones of corpses to mix with fresh blood. He believed he could administer this tincture to the newly deceased and revive them. And the villagers grew to fear and hate him. Alike they must guard their dead, and alike listen for his footsteps or the bridle bells of his horse. Many a time he burst into a house of grief. In a bottle he carried his filthy mixture, stuffing it into the slack mouth of the empty body as a goose is stuffed for liver pâté. There was no resurrection. At length, everyone in the surrounding villages came together and burned him alive in the castle. The very walls reek of dismemberment and death. I looked at the ruined place. An outside staircase, dark and tumbling like a Piranesi nightmare, collapsed and grown through with weeds, leading spiral by spiral, step by step down to where? What cellar of horror? I pulled my shawl close. The air itself had the cold of the grave. "Come," I said to Shelley, "we must leave this place." He put his arm around me, and together we walked swiftly away, and as we walked, he instructed me in the art of alchemy. "The alchemist sought three things," said Shelley: "the secret of turning lead into gold, the secret of the elixir of eternal life, and the homunculus." "What is an homunculus?" I asked. "A creature not born of woman," he answered. "A made thing, unholy and malign, a kind of goblin, misshapen and sly, infused with dark powers." In the oppressive twilight of our winding walk back to the inn, I thought of that thing, that fully formed being not born of woman. And now that form has returned, and it is not small. No goblin. I feel as though my mind is a screen, and on the other side of the screen there is a being seeking life. I've seen fish in the aquarium pushing their faces against the glass, and I sense what I cannot say except in the form of a story. I will call my hero. Is he a hero? Victor. For he seeks victory over life and over death. He will seek to penetrate the recesses of nature. He will not be an alchemist. I want no hocus pocus here. He will be a doctor, like Polidori, like Dr. Lawrence. He will discern the course of the blood, know the knot of muscle, the density of bone, the delicacy of tissue, how the heart pumps, airways, liquids, mass, jelly, the cauliflower mystery of the brain. And he will compose a man larger than life and make him live. I will use electricity, storm, spark, lightning. I will rod him with fire like Prometheus. He will steal life from the gods. At what cost? His creature will have the strength of 10 men, the speed of a galloping horse. The creature will be more than human, but he will not be human. Yet he suffers. Suffering, I do believe, is something of the mark of the soul. Machines do not suffer. My creator will not be a madman. He will be a visionary, a man with family and friends dedicated to his work, and I will take him to the brink and make him leap. I will show his glory as well as his horror. I will call him Victor Frankenstein. And so we go. Leave you that for a minute. Water, hang on. I'm coming back. So, let's think about this. 200 years have passed. And the thing about books is that they live outside of time, really. They live in that thing that religious people call eternity, because they're not time-bound in the way that we are. They pass through the generations easily and land where they will. Sometimes books are forgotten, then they're refound. So it is, and we never know what story will speak to what generation. But I believe that Mary Shelley, in her dark vision, that girl of 19, saw something that she couldn't understand and she couldn't place. It was a message in a bottle. It was a flare sent across time. And here we are now, 200 years later, the first generation who can really read this. Why? Because soon we will share the planet with a life form that we have created, not out of the discarded body parts of the graveyard, but out of the zeros and ones of code. This is a momentous step for us. It was a step that Mary Shelley saw. It was also, strangely, a step that another young woman, Lord Byron's only daughter that we know of, Ada Lovelace, understood. Ada Lovelace was the first person to use the word program in terms of programming a computer. She did this because her father, Lord Byron, had put down in writing specific instructions that she was to have nothing to do with poetry. And so her mother, Arabella Wentworth, did something very strange for the time, and she hired a tutor for the little Ada, a maths tutor. And Ada became a maths prodigy. And then she met the aging Charles Babbage. You'll remember Babbage invented really the first computer. It was called the difference engine, and then the analytical engine. And it was massive. It was all built out of bits of iron, because, really, this is the Industrial Revolution, and everything's big. Just think about it. It's all iron. Think about the chains, the levers, the gears, the cogs, the railway tracks, the steamships. They did not do the nano in the Victorian age. No, no, no. So there's Babbage building this thing out of iron, and it went through all his rooms like a giant train set. And Ada came and looked at it. She was only in her 20s, and she thought, he's never going to build it. But then she thought, if he could build it, I could program it. And she really did say that. And because she was still a girl, even though she did maths, she also quite liked embroidery, and she was fascinated by a new invention, courtesy of the Industrial Revolution, called the Jacquard Loom. And the Jacquard Loom was, in fact, it was like a sort of knitting machine. So it was able to put patterns on canvas and on cloth. So instead of having to embroider yourself to death, doing butterflies and flowers, which is all Victorian women ever did, the Jacquard Loom could do it for you. And she looked at it, and she saw that it did it through a series of punch cards. Now, what did Bill Gates and Paul Allen use the first time they made a Microsoft program? Punch cards. Ada was there first. These two astonishing young women, Mary Shelley and Ada Lovelace, this vision of the future. I mean, Ada even thought that if Charles Babbage could build his difference engine, we could all be sort of connected to it. Which is a bit of a Matrix moment, isn't it? Except that, as this is the Victorian age, she was worried that it would use an awful lot of coal, because it would have to be steam-powered. So there were bits that they could not get past, but there were bits that they saw. And so here we are now on the cusp of something extraordinary, where we're all used to shouting at Alexa in the kitchen, living with Siri on our phones. We're used to Amazon telling us what we want with their algorithms long before we even want it. We're all of us glued to our smartphones. In fact, we probably will be glued to them soon, because they'll become an implant. And so we're at the moment she saw. And it's a moment we need to face collectively and honestly and intelligently, because it's going to change everything. And you have to remember that in the original Frankissstein, the crucial thing is that Victor Frankissstein doesn't bother to educate his monster, which is a crucial failing. Not only doesn't he educate him intellectually, he doesn't educate him in terms of feeling. Mary Shelley was really strong on this. She didn't believe that heart and head should be separated. And one of the key terrors of the book is the fact that the monster is not only named, but is not educated. So when you think about machine learning now, and we all know enough about unconscious bias to know there's going to be a problem, just ask, how are we going to educate our monsters that we're going to make? So I'm going to read you a little bit more now. The book moves back and forth in time, and all I did was take the characters and just push them through a mirror into the present. So Mary Shelley becomes Rachelle, a young trans doctor. Lord Byron becomes Ron Lord, who's a bit of an Essex geezer who lost his job, invested his redundancy money in Bitcoin, made a fortune, and then realised that what everybody wanted was sex dolls. To meet him. Victor Frankissstein becomes Victor Stein, who is a leading expert on AI and the future of robotics. I just wanted to just bring them now into the present without any explanation. But I'm going to read to you a little bit from the point where Victor Stein is giving a lecture on AI, and Rachelle's already been down and interviewed Ron Lord about the future of sex bots. So they've met before. That's all you really need to know. So please now, if you just bear with me for a little while, here is Victor Stein, Ron Lord, and Shelley.
Your name?
Shelley.
Press?
Guest. I'm a guest of Professor Stein. Professor Stein's lecture is open to the public and live streamed on the Royal Society website. I watched the audience come in. Students with man bags slung across their bodies, hipsters with close beards, kids in T-shirts who work at London's tech hub in Shoreditch, sleek bankers, suave in handmade suits, geeks, sci-fi buffs, 2 Muslim women in headscarves wearing Sophia the Robot hoodies. There's a lot of young people in this audience. Victor Stein has a big following on Facebook and Twitter. His TED Talk has netted 6 million views. He's on a mission, that's certain. There's a nice, clear graphic coming up on his screen. Type 1 life, evolution-based. And Victor explains that changes happen slowly over millennia. Type 2 life, partially, self-designing. And that's where we are now. We can develop our own brain software through learning, including outsourcing to machines. We update ourselves individually and generationally, and we can adapt within a generation to a changing world. Think of toddlers and iPads. We've invented machines of every kind for travel and labour. Horses and hoes are a thing of the past. We can also overcome some of our biological limitations. Spectacles, eye laser, dental implants, hip replacements, organ transplants, prosthetics. We've begun to explore space. Type 3 life, fully self-designing. The nearby world of AI will be a world where the physical limits of our bodies will be irrelevant. Robots will manage much of what humans manage today. And intelligence and perhaps even consciousness will no longer be dependent on a body. We will learn to share the planet with non-biological life forms created by us. We will colonize space. I'm watching Victor as he talks. He has that sex mix of soul-saving and erudition. His body is lean and keen. His hair is abundant enough for vitality, grey enough for gravitas. Straight jaw, blue eyes, crisp shirt, tailored trousers, tapered at the bottom, handmade shoes. He knows how to play a room. He'll walk away from the podium to make a point, and he likes to crumple his notes and throw them to the floor. He's a gospel channel scientist on a mission. But who will be saved? Behind him, on the screen tonight, is Leonardo's drawing of the Vitruvian Man. And as the audience sit in silence, Leonardo's image animates itself, and taking an appearing trilby from an appearing peg, places it on the back of its head and walks into an appearing sea. The image of the man walks without pausing until the waters reach his head, and all that is left behind is the hat, floating calmly on the indifferent sea. Victor Stein smiled and he said, I call this lecture the future of humans in a post-human world because artificial intelligence is not sentimental. It is biased towards best possible outcomes, and the human race is not a best possible outcome. Victor likes the audience to interact with him, to ask questions, so he opens up the floor, and one of the Muslim women in the Sophia hoodies raises her hand, and the runner passes her the microphone.
Professor Stein, as you know, the Hanson robot, Sophia, was awarded citizenship of Saudi Arabia in 2017. She has more rights than any Saudi woman. What does this tell us about artificial intelligence?
Nothing. It tells us a great deal about Saudi Arabia.
Will women be the first casualties of obsolescence in your brave new world?
On the contrary, AI need not replicate outmoded gender prejudices. If there is no biological male or female, then...
What about sex bots? Pulsing vaginas that never say no?
A young man gets in on the act.
Yeah, and you don't even have to buy them dinner.
Professor Stein senses that he's losing the room, so he holds up his hand to quell the micro-conversations bubbling around the hall. He has natural authority, like a lion tamer, and he says, there is a substantial difference between low to medium-grade robotics that deploy narrow goal outcomes, and I would include a pulsating vagina in that, even if she can call you big boy in 8 languages. But I can see a shape jumping up and down in the back row trying to speak, but Professor Stein ignores the shape and continues. Please listen. A substantial difference between narrow goal outcomes and true artificial intelligence, by which I mean machines that will learn to think for themselves. Another woman stands up to interrupt him. I can see the splash of anger on his face, like he's caught in a headlight, and he takes a step back. The woman, she's attractive in a discontented kind of way. Blonde hair escaping from her clip, a torn, expensive jacket. She says,
Professor Stein, you are the acceptable face of AI. But in fact, the race to create what you call true artificial intelligence is a race run by autistic spectrum white boys with poor emotional intelligence and frat dorm social skills. In what way will their brave new world be gender neutral, or anything neutral?
I wouldn't call the Chinese autistic spectrum white boys.
China is a chauvinistic culture, where men grow up learning to disparage women. They are the biggest manufacturers and the biggest consumers of sex bots.
I can see that guy in the back waving his hand again. But Professor Stein holds up his hand to pause her, and he says, I agree with what you're saying about the current state of machine learning. Yes, there are problems, but it is my view that such problems are temporary and not systemic. But the woman won't back down. She holds onto the microphone and she shouts at him.
What is so smart about the end of the human?
Victor looks unhappy. He wouldn't call it unhappy. He would call it misunderstood. So he waits. He isn't patient, but he knows how to wait the way an actor or a politician knows how to wait to deliver a line. And then he does one of the things that he does so well. He heads out of the sciences and into the arts. To name things wrongly is to add to the misfortune of the world. His voice recognition app writes up the quote on the screen behind him, and we stare at it. It's beautiful, like an equation. He says, let me start by repeating what I said at the beginning of my lecture. In other words, weren't you listening, goldfish brain? It is not the Silicon Valley geeks who are perversely turning life as we know it into an algorithm. It is the biologists. It is from the natural sciences that the barrier between organic and inorganic is being dismantled. What is an algorithm? An algorithm is a series of steps for solving a recurring problem. Now, problem isn't a bad thing. It's more of a how do I? Now, problem might be my route to work every morning. It might be I am a tree. How do I transpire? So an algorithm is a data processing plant. Frogs, potatoes, humans can be understood as biological data processing plants, if you believe the biologists. Computers are non-biological data processing plants. So if data is the input and the rest is processing, then humans aren't so special after all. And is that so terrible a piece of knowledge? Perhaps it comes as a relief. We haven't been wonderful as masters of the universe, have we? Climate breakdown, mass extinction of flora and fauna, destruction of habitat and wilderness, atmospheric pollution, failure to control population, extraordinary brutality, the daily stupidity of our childish feelings. So if we're reaching the end of Project Human, don't blame the geeks. And science, remember, tries to deal in realities and not magical thinking. Science is no longer convinced that Homo sapiens is a special case. Victor smiles and he turns to the quote on the screen behind him. He says, "To name things wrongly is to add to the misfortune of the world." Albert Camus. You may not have read him, but perhaps you should. In any case, you all know, however vaguely, the Bible story of the Garden of Eden, and that Adam's task was to name his world. Naming is power. And the world that I'm trying to name for you tonight, the world that AI will make possible, will not be a world of labels. And that includes binaries like male and female, black and white, rich and poor. There will not be a distinction between heart and head, between what I feel and what I think. The future will not be a version of Blade Runner where replicants long to be named like humans and therefore to be known like humans. What I'm proposing is far bigger. Even if the first superintelligence is the worst possible iteration of what you might call the white male autistic default program, the first upgrade by the intelligence itself will begin to correct such errors. And why? Because we humans will only program the future once. And after that, the intelligence we create will manage itself, and it will manage us. Thank you. There's a drinks reception afterwards, and the women in the hoodies are asking Victor if he's ever met Sophia, the handsome robot with a sense of humour. I want to kill all humans. He has. He likes her. It's all about humans and robots working together for a better life. But I know that Victor isn't really interested in robotics. He wants pure intelligence, but he sees robots as an intermediate species that will help humanity adjust to its coming role. The nature of that role is unclear. In theory, if you own your own robot, you can send it out to work for you and keep the money, or you can use it at home as an unpaid servant, or you can send it to weed your now chemical-free farm. It should be great. But when have things ever worked out great in the human dream? Rye! Victor comes over and claps me on the back. By his side is the man who was jumping up and down in the lecture, trying to get a word in sideways, though even sideways, Ron Lord is substantial. Rye, you've met Ron Lord, haven't you? At the Techbotics conference in Memphis. Sexbotics, I say. Yeah, I was interviewing Ron about the soon-to-be relationship world of sexbots and humans. Crumpled grey suit. Faint urine stain on the crotch. I suppose it's urine. And a pink shirt that gapes between the 5th and 6th buttons. He's pink underneath too. Ron is regarding me, and reluctantly he holds out his hand. All right, Ryan, all right. Hello, Ron. My name's Rye. Just Rye. What? It ain't short for Ryan? Rye is short for Mary. Ron falls silent while he processes this fact. Now, the thing about humans is that we process information at different speeds, depending on the human, depending on the information. In some ways, machines are easier to deal with. If I had just told machine intelligence that I am now a man, although I was born a woman, it wouldn't slow up its processing speed. What? He's a female? No, Ron, I'm a hybrid. My name's Rye. Oh, he's a bloke then? I'm trans. What? Tranny? Transgender. Oh, you look like a bloke. Not a serious bloke, but a bloke. Would I have given you that interview at the Sexpo if I thought you was a female? Nah. I'm trans. I say it again. Hang on. It's always a moment, isn't it? Victor has his hand on Ron's shoulder. Ron, did you bring Claire? Yeah, she's in the cloakroom, folded in half. She's only about 2'6", doubled up. I put her in a gym bag. There's a few of them in there. Oh, gym bags, I mean. I think some of our guests would like to see her, says Victor. Yeah, all right, but I didn't like what you said about sex bots, about them being no threat. All new development is a threat, right? Someday, robots will be an independent life form. That's what you told me when I said I might invest in you. That is correct, says Victor, but at present, all sex bots are narrow goal robots. What, you mean they got small cunts? That's not what I mean. So what exactly do you mean? Mean exactly? What I mean, says Victor, is that your robots do what it says on the box. They offer sex and personal satisfaction. That ain't no narrow goal. That is the sum total. That is what men want. Not all men, says Victor. It's not what I want, I say. And Ron looks at me with even more doubt and even more dismay. He puts his free hand back in his pocket and waves his whiskey glass at me. Listen, Ryan, Mary, whatever your name is, I ain't being personal, but have you got a dick? I think that's personal, says Victor. No, I say, my name is Mary Shelley and I don't have a dick. All right. OK, no dick. So you ain't no bloke, really. So what blokes want, well, it ain't up to you, innit? Is manhood dickhood? I ask Ron. And he looks at me like I'm the stupidest thing he has ever seen. Why would you want to be a man if you don't want a dick? I'm not sure how to proceed, so I keep it personal. And I say to Ron, I didn't feel comfortable as a woman. Oh, why not? Well, it's hard to explain. Do you fancy girls? You fancy girls? But you fancy being a leso? I get that. I'm attracted to men. Ron takes a step back, and his hand moves protectively towards his crotch. I want to say, don't worry, Ron. I don't mean you. Someone distracts Victor, and I'm left with nonplussed Ron. He says, OK, Ryan, OK. I don't know if he's a bloke or whatever, but he's definitely a doctor. That's right. In an hospital? Yes. How do you know the prof? I supply him with body parts. Ron's pink nose starts twitching like a terrier's. Does he expect me to smell of mould? Is he looking for bloodstains, dirt under my fingernails? I'm not a grave robber, Ron. Do you think I go to the churchyard at night with a crowbar and a sack? You think I spade away the heaped mound of earth, prise open the coffin lid, lift her out from her last resting place, clothes damp with decay, and carry her off for dissection? Nah, says Ron, meaning yes. Death is natural. Yet, nothing looks more unnatural than a dead body. I remember when we first met and Victor's soft, urgent voice standing behind me. It looks wrong, doesn't it, Rye? It looks wrong because it is wrong. Victor Stein works across the boundary of smart medicine and machine learning. He's teaching non-human intelligence to diagnose. Machines are better than we are at the algorithms of disease. The doctor of the future will be a robot, but skin is skin and flesh is flesh, and you can't learn anatomy from textbooks and videos. As long as there are bodies, you will need a body parts. And I've seen the little probes gliding curiously across the muscles of a severed arm, preserved, and into the soft tissue of a leg, decaying. When you amputate a leg, it has to be carried out of theatre, and legs are surprisingly heavy. Oh, you amputate legs? Not only legs. How's it done? With a saw. Ron's pink face is turning pale. I like my legs. They ain't fast, and they're all both fat, but I've had them a long time. I understand, I say to him. And there's a pause while Ron contemplates his legs. And he asks me, with the childlike trust that people put in doctors, how much does my leg weigh? Ron's legs are short but substantial, so I take a guess. Around 20 kilos detached here, and I run my finger at groin level. He dresses on the left. Ron jumps and looks down apprehensively at the crumpled cloth of his still attached lower limb. What big hands you got? all the better to amputate you with. You've got a bloke's hands. My mother had big hands. She died when I was born. My build is slender, and I'm not particularly tall at 5'8". When I had top surgery, there wasn't much to remove, and the hormones had already altered my chest. I never wore a bra when I was a female. I like my chest the way it is now, strong, smooth, flat, and I wear my hair tied back in a ponytail like an 18th century poet. When I look in the mirror, I see someone I recognize, or rather, I see at least two people I recognize. And that's why I've chosen not to have lower surgery. I am what I am, but what I am is not one thing and not one gender. I live with doubleness. Victor comes back over with another glass of whiskey for Ron. You two seem to be getting on well, and he's looking at me quizzically in the way that he does. Yeah, I was telling Ron about your body parts. I was explaining to him about our special relationship. Ah, yes, says Victor, every lab needs its body parts. And now he's looking at me anxiously. How much have I said? Too bad, let him sweat, like Ron Lord. What I didn't say to Ron is that Victor Stein needs more body parts than his research allowance allows. Just then, two security guards in blue shirts come running through the room, pulling on gloves and waving their tasers.
Stand back! Stand back!
Victor follows the guards, and I follow Victor as they run towards the cloakroom. The cloakroom attendant is looking pale. It's alive. It's moved. By now, there's a crowd at the cloakroom. The guard stands on a chair. Is anybody responsible for this Adidas gym bag? Ron Lord's pink hand appears above the crowd line. Open it up, please, sir. Ron shoulders his way through the crowd like he's his own bouncer at his own nightclub. He picks up the bag, lays it on the cloakroom counter and unzips it. Out comes a sex bot, folded in half, and her denim jacket has Claire written on it in sequins.
Daddy.
I don't know how she got set off. She's controlled by an app. What is this thing? Oh, she's a sex bot. The prof, he asked me to bring her in. Wait a sec, she needs unfolding. Ron pulls down Claire's legs one at a time.
Open my legs, Daddy.
Her
Wider.
Her legs unfolded. Ron stands Claire up, holding her from behind like a ventriloquist. Claire is wearing a pair of shorts and a tight crop top with a black bra underneath. Ron adjusts her hair. Oh, it's a travelling outfit. You can't fold up her legs in a skirt without splitting it.
Split me.
I'm sorry about this. She's in bedroom mode. I can go in the app and I'll put her into visitor mode. Wait!
Don't make me wait, Daddy.
I can't get a signal down here.
I touch myself down here.
Claire is like a parrot on heat. Her programming allows her to pick up and repeat words. Ron is holding his phone above his head and he says, "Older, will you, while I sort out my fucking phone?" Ron thrusts Claire at one of the guys standing nearby, and the guy can't believe he's holding a sex doll.
Oh my God! She's got like a 20-inch waist and 40-inch boobs.
Boobs. Nipples. Cock.
Awesome!
What is this bracket in her back? Asks one of the guys, examining Claire. Oh, it's an optional extra. You can wall mount her. Oh, like a trophy on the wall? Nah, so you can fuck her standing up.
Fuck me standing up, Daddy.
Some of the boys are enjoying this. I can tell from the rise in their jeans. Ron is sweating visibly as his fat fingers work his iPhone.
How was your journey today?
Thank Christ. She's in visitor mode now. I realise this place is a serious scientific institution.
Have you come from an institution?
What you don't understand, Nonia, Claire is a sex therapy aide. Put your finger in her mouth. Go on. One of the men hesitates, but he does it, and he jumps back like he's been bitten. Vibrates, yeah? And that's just your finger. And that's just her mouth. What is the point of this? I say to Victor. Why are you encouraging him? Victor just shrugs. This is the coming world, right? When people have nothing to do all day, they'll have a lot more time for sex. That isn't sex, Victor. I can't decide with you, Rye, whether you're a Puritan or a romantic. I'm a human being. And what if you were one of the millions of human beings who will have no place in the automated life that will soon be reality. Cars, trucks, buses, trains will drive themselves. Stores and supermarkets will use smart tracking for your purchases. Your home will use repair diagnostics. Your fridge will order its own food. Bots will take care of the housework and entertain your children. What will you do all day? It's not how you sold it in your lecture. No. And that's not how it will be for those of us able to be part of the new world. For us, life will be unlimited.
Do you enjoy your job?
For the rest, says Victor, there must be diversions and soporifics. Sex bots can provide both. Not for women, it seems, I said, as we looked across at the crowd, now shaped into two groups, male and female, the men laughing and joking with Ron, the women talking to each other in low voices of despair or disbelief. I agree, says Victor. Women are harder to please. Ron Lord comes over. He thinks he's a success. Oh, they can't get enough of her. Once you get to know my girls, you can't get enough. Tell you what, I'll treat us all. Come on, something to eat, yeah? Prof, Ryan, I could murder a steak. Good job it's dead already. Ron looks at me more in sorrow than in anger. Ryan, it ain't like I ain't extending the hand. And he extends his hand. Thanks, Ron, but I'm vegetarian. I knew you wasn't a bloke. Right, come with us. We can walk up to Sheiky's. You can have vegetarian fish. Ron turns to retrieve Claire from her admirers, and Victor says to me, will I see you later? Do you want to see me later? I want to see you now and later. I'll call you. Ron returned with his Adidas bag full of Claire. I raised my big hand, signal goodbye. Going, gone. Outside, on the Mall, the buildings are blurred with light rain, and my boot cleats leave prints on the cellophane smoothness of the wet pavements. I look back. There's a trace of me. And then the prints disappear under the rain. On the road, cars queue in tail light red, horns, traffic noise, ceaseless, comforting. The rain increases. On the street, under hoods and umbrellas, people are walking quickly, going somewhere, leaving somewhere, earphones in, their faces lit by phone light, atomized and alone. I am alone. Thank you. Oh. Thank you. I'm sorry about the dirty bits. It's not my fault. One of the problems with sex bots is you can look them up on YouTube and look at some of the comments underneath. Things like, you don't have to buy them dinner and serves feminists right. They do all have 3 holes, and the better models vibrate. You know, the cheap ones are like, a couple of grand. The expensive ones, you can go up to $20,000 now. But it's an improvement if you're a Ron Lord. As he said, blow-up dolls, it was like wrapping your dick in cling film. So these ones are supposedly better. They do have the 3 holes. What they don't have, of course, because they're supposed to be anatomically correct, but I expect that the ladies in the audience can guess, the one bit of them that is not anatomically correct, because sex dolls don't have clitorises. All sex dolls come when you do. So it's going to make life a lot simpler. In China at present, China is still the biggest manufacturer of sex dolls. The one-child policy has left a shortfall ratio, women to men, of 33 million. And there is a real push at the moment, I'm not making this up, I'm fiction writer, I'm not making this up, that sex bots will also become companions and will help to fill the gap that many Chinese men will face who don't choose to have mistresses, wives, girlfriends, brides from elsewhere, but would like to have a Chinese partner, albeit one made of silicon. I suggest you go and have a look online if you want to know more about this. And I know novelists always exaggerate, but I'm not. And I'm going back to that business with Ada Lovelace and Mary Shelley. You know, over the last 100 years, women have made so much ground. We have really progressed as artificial barriers have been taken away. Women have now been able to do everything and anything, and do it well. Things have changed so rapidly, only in 100 years. But the future might not be female. And it might not be female because women aren't going into computer science or IT, and they're not learning to code, and they're not doing machine learning, partly because the environment is seen as or is hostile to women. They don't feel very comfortable there. Maybe because women are more people, I don't know. But it's not happening. So we could have a situation where we are coded out of what comes next. So even I, at home, am busy learning Python. So what you're going to have to do, if you've got daughters, the best thing that you can do is teach them to code. And what we all need to do, because this future is going to happen, it's not an invention. Mary Shelley saw it, but it is here. And we need to be part of the conversation. Because when things happen and they're just forced upon us, everybody suffers. We don't want that. You know, right now, Google, Apple, Facebook, PayPal, they're all racing to be the first to manage general artificial intelligence. It's a way off yet, but it will certainly come. You know, right back in 1965, a guy called Jack Good, his real name was Isaac Goodak. He was a Polish Jew, and he worked with Alan Turing in Hut 8 at Bletchley Park. And Jack Good left the UK after Alan Turing was prosecuted because he was so disgusted at how Turing had been treated. Jack Good wasn't gay himself. He just wanted, what he said was, I'm not saying that Alan Turing won the war, but without him we certainly would have lost it. And he could not believe that the man was treated in the way that he was. So off went Jack Good, and he went to advise Stanley Kubrick on 2001: A Space Odyssey, with HAL, the murderous computer. Anyway, right back in 1965, it was Jack Good who coined the phrase, our last invention. Because he said, we'll only program it once. He said, once we've done this, it's game over for Homo sapiens. He wasn't particularly worried about it, but he knew it was coming. And that was a good 50 years ago. And worth thinking about. So what I want really, what I want with Frankissstein, what I want tonight, is I want you, all of you, to educate yourself about what's going on, which you can easily do. There's some fantastic books out there that you can find about where we are now, where the science is up to, you know, where the tech's up to, and wonder how we can perhaps shape the future rather than have the future happen to us. It could be fabulous, but as Rachelle says throughout the book, and as Mary Shelley says, they talk about the human dream and say, when did everything ever go right in the human dream? But this is our dream. And you know, my next book is going to be called Jurassic Carpark, because it's a series of essays about how lucky we were that we didn't have to share the planet when the dinosaurs were here, because it would never have worked out. What we are about to do is share the planet with self-created, non-biological life forms that will be smarter than us. Remember, they don't eat, they don't drink, they don't die. They can take all the time there is to solve a problem. They can upgrade themselves. Even if you stick them in a Faraday cage, they'll find a way out. There's some good games on the internet there about whether you would let out a super intelligence if it could persuade you. You get to pay the jailer, and it gets to try and persuade you to let it out. You always let it out. And you know, one of the problems is that geeks haven't read enough fairy stories. What happens when the genie is out of the bottle? It doesn't go back in. So Faraday cage or not, it's coming, it's happening. So I need you next year, the year after, I need you to all come back next year and tell me you know it all. And you can start by buying this excellent book. Where is it? I think it's very cheap. I think it's on special offer tonight, probably. Frankissstein, a Love Story, which will be in the bookshop. And I will be in the bookshop too, signing copies. Promise me, you will persuade your daughters to learn to code. Good night. Thank you. I'm going.